In the year 70 CE, the physical epicenter of the Jewish world shatters. The destruction of the Second Temple is a systemic failure. The religion's spatial and agricultural identity is suddenly offline. This creates a vacuum of power. For centuries, the religious and political structures operated around a single, fixed location. When the walls fall, the ruling class experiences institutional shock. The brunt of this shock falls on the Sadducees. They are the affluent ruling elite, embedded in the temple hierarchy. Their authority relies on physical infrastructure, the system's hardware. The Sadducean vocabulary for legitimacy is tied to the earth. They derive power from the priesthood, statecraft, the administration of borders, and processing of physical agricultural yields. We see this dependency in how they define their holidays. To the Sadducees, the festival of Shavuot is an agricultural deadline. It is a harvest festival linked to the crops growing in their soil. Because their identity is bound to the land and the temple, the loss of that hardware leaves them with nothing. The Sadducees vanish from the historical record within a generation. Hardware dependency creates an inaction tax. When your system is built on a physical location, the collapse of your borders leads to institutional extinction. The Pharisees, a marginalized class of scholars, recognized the vulnerabilities of this centralized model. While the Sadducees held the political elite, the Pharisees focused on the study of the law. Their solution to the impending collapse is systemic decoupling. They abstract the hardware of the temple into the software of text, tradition, and time. Instead of relying on a single capital city, they build a decentralized network. Their central institution becomes the Bet Midrash, the house of study. It is a node that can be replicated in any country, independent of a central authority. Under this new architecture, the festival of Shavuot undergoes a critical update. Without fields to harvest in the land of Israel, the agricultural function becomes defunct. The Pharisees decouple the holiday from the soil and link it to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. By shifting the focus from a physical harvest to the reception of the law, the system's core identity becomes portable. Divorcing the religion from spatial reliance is the prerequisite for survival. It establishes an architecture of exile capable of weathering 2 millennia without physical borders. To understand this architecture, we look at how it maps the physical world. The foundation is a 7x7 grid. In Jewish mysticism, 7 dictates the cycles of this world. Squared, you hit 49, the mathematical limit of physical progression. We see this limit in the 49 days of the Omer count, tracking the period between Passover and Shavuot. This count begins with an offering of barley, a grain used for animal fodder. It is a climb through the physical realm, but going one step beyond that limit triggers a phase transition. You reach the 50th node. The 50th node correlates to the 50th day, Shavuot. Here, the coarse barley is replaced by an offering of high-quality wheat. The system has transcended the animalistic to reach a higher expression of maturity. This structure scales up to the 50th year, the Yovel, or Jubilee. After 7 cycles of 7 years, the 50th year wipes the economic slate clean and frees slaves. It resets the physical board. The exact inverse exists at the other end of the spectrum. In the Book of Esther, Haman builds his gallows exactly 50 cubits high, representing the limit of physical impurity and detachment from the divine. The number 50 marks the entry into a paradigm outside the physical grid. It is the destination of the decoupling process. Operating in that 50th node means living in exile, off the grid. When a system is stripped of its land and autonomy, it must hide its core processes from hostile dominant cultures. The architects of the exile achieved this by embedding ghost data within their texts. They used textual cryptography to encode theological truths in plain sight. The Book of Esther is the case study for this technique. On the surface, it reads like a secular political thriller. The name of God is absent from the plain text, but the data is there, hidden in the initial and final letters of royal decrees. This highlights Esther chapter 5, verse 4. By tracking the initial letters of 4 consecutive words, we find a forward-spelled acrostic of the name of God, YHWH. The encryption has its own internal logic. Looking at Esther chapter 7, verse 7, we see another forward-spelled acrostic. The forward spelling is deployed specifically when the text indicates God is ruling directly to cause action. Now examine Esther chapter 5, verse 13. Here, during the villain Haman's moment of gloating, the acrostic is spelled backward. The backward sequence is used when the system is overruling foreign intent. Linguistic encryption allows the network to maintain an intact theological core while passing as a secular document to the censors of a hostile empire. This cryptographic defense mechanism evolved as the threats grew. In the year 1096, during the First Crusade, a cantor in Germany composed a liturgical poem known as the Akdamut. Chanted on Shavuot, it is an active anti-Christian polemic. It asserts the truths of Judaism against a world that was trying to force its religion upon Jewish neighbors at the threat of death. Delivering a text that refuted the dominant religion was dangerous. Jewish rabbis were forced into rigged debates overseen by church officials. The true meaning of the poem had to be obscured from the listeners. The author secured the text by writing the poem in Aramaic. By utilizing a language that was obsolete to the Christian ruling class, he created an encryption layer. For a decentralized nation without an army, textual camouflage became the active defense mechanism. Survival required trading the fragility of spatial dominance for the resilience of textual encoding. Because the text was the only asset that successfully crossed every border, it became more than a defensive tool. It became the community's primary identity. The Zohar reframes this shift. If the text is the only thing the people have left, it becomes the bride. The hidden encryption we saw in the Book of Esther is no longer just a survival tactic. It is the jewelry that defines the nation. In the ancient world, a royal wedding required the bride to be adorned with 24 specific ornaments. When the Jewish state fell, the text had to provide the ornamentation that physical statecraft once did. The Zohar maps those 24 physical ornaments directly onto the 24 books of the Tanakh. In this manuscript, the geometric borders and text blocks function as the jewelry. The books of the Bible are the ornaments. This makes the text the agalma, the hidden treasure. It replaces physical borders as the crowning identity of the people. The stone walls of the Second Temple fell over 2 millennia ago, but the decentralized network built on this sequence of texts remains active today. Systemic endurance against the inaction tax requires moving into the 50th node. A civilization only survives when it encodes its truths into a portable, mathematical, and cryptographic architecture.